Hey, Say, how are you? It's Patty.
I'm, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent.
I
So I
thought you were
had,
going to be late.
well, this client's always late. So I even asked her yesterday, I said, hey, can we make it early? Oh, I'll try. And of course, yeah, I don't know how
Yeah.
this is going to work. I have a feeling that, I can't, I can hardly hang out in a crowded room. So I don't think I'm going to be able to listen to you guys and talk to her at the same time.
Yeah, that might be a little bit tough.
So do you think you're going to record it by chance?
Yes, in fact, it is automatically recording already.
Oh.
Yes, I have my Zoom set to auto record because
Okay.
Otherwise I totally forget to turn on the recording every
Oh, that's smart. Okay, so when we hold our 10K after boot camp groups with the, you guru set up one that we can hop on at any time. So those are recorded?
I'm not sure if all of them are recorded, but I believe that if it's anything officially 10K,
Yeah.
it is being recorded. And if it is anything not officially 10K, like this is just, we decided to do this.
Yeah.
So I'm recording, but
Okay.
It would depend on the person hosting whether or not they're choosing to record.
Oh, very cool. Okay. All right. Enough of logistics. I'll let you take the floor.
Awesome. So for those of you that just joined, just forewarned, this is being recorded because we are going to share it with everyone else when we're done. Other than that, thank you guys for joining me, and hopefully that recording is okay. You guys are all on 10K, so you're used to being recorded.
That's perfect.
So I'm just kind of dive into it, and I'm kind of thinking of this almost like one of the mentor mastermind sessions that are going on, where I have some I have some information that I'm going to share with you about processes, and you guys can of course feel free to interrupt me or ask questions or anything as I go. And then there will come a point where I will kind of, I will come to the end of what I want to show you, and we'll just kind of open it to the floor and we can just have a discussion or ask questions or etc. I am super, super organized. So like I have a process and outline for what I'm going to talk about today even, which the fact that I just kind of spontaneously do that these days is why we thought it would be awesome to have this session. And it also kind of goes to show, before I get too deep, before I kind of get going, it goes to show that I used to really struggle at putting down my processes. And now I've gotten to the point where I kind of do it so organically that I do the kind of different steps that I'm going to introduce you to as one step. So you too can get there. I believe in you. Okay. So I just want to say right off the bat, I think I know most of you. Kathy, I haven't spent too much time talking to you, but I'm sure that you're also super awesome and cool.
Hi, Say.
Hi. But pretty much this is kind of aimed at beginner process documenters who are working either mostly on your own or with a small or remote team. So I don't have a huge team, so I can't tell you how to manage processes for a huge team. But I can tell you very well, if you're kind of managing just a few people, how to get that going. The other thing I wanted to say is that just a few thoughts on processes that have come to me. Hello, Mark. Thanks for joining us. So just quick intro to you, Mark. I'm just going to go through, I'm kind of treating this like a mentor mastermind session. So I'm going to go through what I have to talk about. You guys are welcome to ask questions or add comments. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up and we can all chat. So I just wanted to give some thoughts on processes that came to me first. Number one is that a process is pretty much just like a habit. But we all know that habits are kind of challenging to pick up, right? Like they aren't necessarily difficult, but they require consistency. And learning processes and documenting your processes is like learning two habits instead of a habit for every single thing that you do. So those two habits, one habit is documenting how you do something, and the second habit is jumping off of a written process when you're doing something. So by learning those two habits, you're saving your brain from having to learn every single individual thing that you do and teach that as a habit to every single person who wants to absorb it. So that's why it's worth it to really focus on those process habits, because it might seem like it's taking you a long time and feeling frustrating, but it will actually save you way, way, way more time in the long term, because it's only 2 habits that you're having to pick up instead of infinite. The other thought I would just wanted to share is that a process is also just kind of like a list that you put into order. So if I could kind of sum up everything I'm going to say into one sentence, it would be make a list, put it in order in terms of how and what and etc. Okay. So the 3 questions, I don't have a deck because I'm really good at writing stuff down, but I'm not good at putting it in a visual format. But pretty much there's 3 main things we want to cover, which are where to start, how to break it down into manageable pieces, and then how to do it as you go. So we'll start with where to start. So the first thing before you start is that you want to pick a medium that you're going to be recording your processes into. Hello, Pam. I'm just going to keep going. Feel free to ask a question if you have one. So pick a recording medium. Preferably this is something you already use, because that will save you from getting hung up on what tool you're going to use. So 2 really great ones that I suggest, or I guess 3, are Evernote or OneNote, if you use one of those. I used to use Evernote. Now I use OneNote, but that's a discussion for another time. And/or Google Docs. Those are 2 really simple, easy to interlink things within each other. So if you don't know where to start, I suggest picking one of those 3. Now, how do we start? There's 2 basic ways to approach process building. And this is totally coming from me and my experiences. This is not something that I read. I kind of call those top down or bottom up. So the first way is top down. So that's starting by figuring out what processes you need to document, and then making a plan to document each of them systematically, or assigning them to other people to be documented. The second way is bottom up, which pretty much starts just on the go whenever you're doing something, which is pretty much just getting into the habit of writing something down. So making a list, writing down the steps, and then trying to follow those steps next time you do it to see what works and what doesn't. So that's where that kind of, the thing that I said, that's making a list and then organizing it, and then learning 2 habits instead of a million habits. That is it, kind of in a nutshell, is writing something down and trying to follow those steps next time. That's pretty much what a process is. So I'm going to get deeper into how to approach those 2. And usually I suggest a combination. Like, I like to start with the second way, which is just whenever I think about it, if I'm doing something, just start where you are. You know, remember the earlier steps if you have to, but better to just get going. Done is the new perfect, as Barbara likes to say. Better to just get going and get recording something than waiting to do it perfectly, or waiting for that perfect moment you're going to do it from beginning to end. But it can help you if you feel stuck, or if you're in kind of a processing mood, or if you have other people to assign processes to, because you're not the one who's actually executing the process. That's when the top down can come in handy, because that's when you're looking at, okay, here's the end game. Here's all the things that we want to have documented. So 2 ways to start and 2 ways to document. So the 2 ways to document, and this,
yep,
hello?
I'm here.
Oh. Did somebody have a question?
Oh. Excellent.
Sounds like maybe.
Hi, Derek. How are you?
Patty, it sounds like you are not muted.
You can right-click her and mute her.
Oh, okay. Mute. Okay. Patty is now muted. Awesome. So, so regardless of the tool, you're going to have 2 basic ways to document your processes. And the first one is a numbered list, and the second one is a mind map. And again, there's like different circumstances in which you might want to use a numbered list versus a mind map, which I will get into in a few moments. But I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but that's pretty much what I've come across again and again and again. And a mind map is essentially a flow chart. And if you've never used one before, I'm going to give a quick demo of that. Okay, so that is kind of the where to start section. Next, I'm going to look at, now that you kind of know where to start, how to make it manageable, because even knowing where to start, it can still be really overwhelming. Is everyone good so far? Does anyone kind of have a question? Is this making sense? Okay, I'm seeing nods. Okay, awesome. So how to break it down into manageable pieces. So in terms of breaking it down into manageable pieces, I would say the first thing I would suggest is to have a master list. Well, it's kind of tied. Have a master list and start with the basics are the two kind of things that you need to break it down into manageable pieces. So a master list obviously can get really overwhelming and out of hand if you're just starting out of nowhere and trying to list stuff. But this is where, once again, those two basic processes, right, those two basic ways of approaching it come in handy. So you can either have a master list and create your master list by just listing kind of the top level processes and then organizing it later. Or you can start with the categories that you want and figure out, okay, what do you need to do to have a process, have all your processes within those categories. So what that means, what are those three categories? Where do you start? I always say start with the basics. And this is, again, kind of looking at that top-down method, which are the three categories that every business has. So this is EOS, but it's also 10K from Bootcamp. The three basic categories are sales and marketing, admin and finance, and project and operations. Even if you're doing all three of those things yourself, those are three separate hats, and we can even break them down into more hats, but let's just keep it simple at three. And that's a really good place to start, because once you look at it, then you're not starting with kind of like an overwhelming amount of ideas in your head. You're starting with categories, right? So regardless of whether you want to just start listing processes that you know of or that you need and putting them into those categories, or whether you want to think, kind of start at the top level, sales and marketing, and just create a process for that, and then break it down kind of more and more complex, you can do it either way. And like I said, I'd say start as simple as possible. And then as you get better at it and as you start working on it, things will just emerge. So once again, done is the new perfect. Just get going. And things will kind of evolve and get more complex as you go. So just try to keep it simple for now. So the next question that kind of comes up is, okay, all of those different tools that we talked about, all of those different things that you can use to help you make a process, where do you start with those, right? How do you figure out which one to use and where? So I would suggest that if you're starting, and these are just, I guess what I'm trying to say are these are just a few different ways of looking at it. It's not exhaustive. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Everyone has their own way that their brain works. So that's why I'm not just telling you step one, do this, step two, do this. I'm kind of giving you the building block concepts that you can use to make a system that works for you. Because ultimately, the best system in the world, if you're not using it, then it's useless to you, right? So, so if you're trying one of these ways and it's not working for you, just try a different way. So if you're trying top down, you're trying to look at, okay, what do I have to do to make a sale? And then breaking that down further than that. Or what does my admin process look like? And breaking it down further than that. Or whether you're just listing out, you know, like how to organize images for a web project, or how to do discovery, and just kind of making a random list and then organizing it into those buckets. Like, just try something different, try something new. Okay. But I would generally suggest that mind maps are really great for if you're doing something that's complicated or working from the top down. The reason for that is that mind maps are really easy to organize things in. When you're copying and pasting text, there's all this formatting that you have to think about, and there's all this clicking and highlighting and all this different type of stuff. When you're working with mind maps, you're essentially working with bubbled ideas that you can then create a hierarchy in a whole bunch of different ways, and you can easily move it around. So it's really easy when I talk about top down to take a really basic kind of 4-step process, or break something down into 4 steps, right? And then once you're doing that, you can drill down on each of those if you need to. Like, I don't know if you guys remember when we first learned discovery, I don't remember whether it was in Bootcamp or the Web Design Sales Kit, but he starts out with just, this is what discovery is: meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3, meeting 4. And then he drills down into, okay, these are the things that we're kind of doing in that, or this leads to yes or no, which leads you to here or there. That's pretty much what a mind map does, is it allows you to organize information and drill down without kind of compromising the whole thing or worrying about formatting. That's why it's also really good for complicated things, because you are moving things around really easily. And when things are complicated, you usually need to move things around a few times before they look right. Also, if you're a visual person, mind maps put ideas into visual form. I'm actually way more word driven than visually driven. So I do a lot of stuff just written in bullet points or numbered lists, as I call them, like hierarchized numbered lists. But I know a lot of people, including myself, use mind maps. If you're starting from the bottom up, so if you're literally just making a list and spewing all of your ideas onto a paper and then going to organize them, that's when a document like a OneNote or Google Docs or something works better, because it's easier for you to just spew down an idea, hit enter, spew down an idea, hit enter, spew down an idea, hit enter. And then you can start to kind of delete things or combine things or kind of look at what the kind of primary concepts and patterns that are emerging in the stuff that you're just spewing down. So I find that Word documents of whatever format are better to do that, because you're copying and pasting a lot more and also deleting things more. That making sense? Not quite seeing, okay, seeing a few nods. I know I tend to talk really fast. So if I'm going too fast, just like wave, literally wave your hand. Don't click the raise your hand, just wave.
Something to just bring up, one thing that's sometimes helpful just to figure out where everyone is to ask, like, where are you in the process? Because, for example, I'm not nodding mainly because I already had the list. It's all in teamwork. I'm just organizing it, setting due dates, and setting estimated times now, because I spent all week on this. So I want to mainly see your teamwork stuff. But other people I know are at that starting point, and they're just digesting what you're saying.
Okay, so maybe raise your hand if this kind of where to start and breaking it down into manageable pieces is where you are at, and that's what you want to see and know about. Okay, I see 3 hands. And then raise your hand if it's really the teamwork and organizing it within teamwork that you want to see. Okay, so 4. So it looks like it's pretty evenly split. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. I just have how to document, integrate processes as you go, and then we'll dig into teamwork. Just actually a quick check also, raise your hand. Have you used mind maps before? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, again, about half. Okay, thanks, Mark. That was a really good kind of teaching tool for you to suggest. I really appreciate that. And that totally lets me see where you guys are at. Okay, so a few other things to just kind of consider when you're using kind of things to augment your processes. If it's complicated, use a mind map. If it's obscure and visual, so they need to click a very specific place or understand where something sits on a menu, use a screenshot. And if it's simple, then maybe just take a screen cap of yourself doing it. Like if it's, I'd say 10 minutes or less for you to do that thing, then there's plenty of free screen cap softwares. I suggest just following yourself. And I just see we have something in the chat, and that is totally okay, Mary, for you to multitask. Okay. So how to do it as we go. And actually this goes well into where to start. For each process that you want to document, start with a goal. What would make you check that idea, that thing that requires multiple steps off as done? Always start with your goal. I should have said that at the beginning. See, I didn't start with my goal. Because that will tell you where to end your process, right? The second thing I suggest in terms of going as you go is to create a template so you're not messing around with it. So if you're doing stuff in a document or if you're doing stuff in a mind maps, you don't necessarily need a template so much, but if you're doing something in a document, just so you're not messing around with the formatting, especially if you are a visually oriented person, just make a template that has a few numbers. It has the goal at the top. It has a place for the date and what category it fits under, and then just use that so you're not messing around with it. Okay. And then I'm going to drill just a little bit more into what I was talking about that top-down method. So brainstorming things and how you get from ideas to process. So just step by step, what I suggest is to start by brainstorming. Start with the goal, right? Then brainstorm everything that you need to get to that goal. So don't worry about the order, worry about quantity, don't worry about quality, just everything as it comes to you about how to get to that goal. and then look at it and see where you can simplify. Are there redundancies? Is there an order that kind of starts to emerge? Once you have it all down, then it's easier to kind of rearrange things into the order that you want. Then, okay, are the different steps, now that they're in order, are they actually actionable? Are there gaps in between those steps? After you've done all that, go back to the beginning. Look at the very first step. That very first step, is it the very first step? Is there something you need to do before you get to that first step? If so, is that a different process? That might give you an idea for the next process you want to document. So that's just a really good way. In fact, that's often how I organize projects or problems or all sorts of stuff, is just starting with blah, put everything down and then worry about organizing it, simplifying it, clarifying it, filling in the gaps, and go from there. The other way that you can do it is to literally just write stuff down next time you do it. So next time you start doing something, like I said before, even if you're in the middle of it, then start making steps and start going there. Okay, so that's kind of a beginner's guide to processing 101. Did that make sense? Are there any questions before I get more specific and go into teamwork? Okay, not seeing anyone kind of getting excited and trying to talk. So I'll just assume that that all kind of makes sense. Either that or you're just overwhelmed with the amount of information and still trying to process it. Okay, and one more thing, lift your hand if it would benefit you to see a process in mind map form and understand kind of what that looks like. Okay, I see 2 hands up, and of course about half the people here don't have their cameras on anyway. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of flash it to show what that looks like so you can see it. And then if you're interested in digging deeper into it with me, then just message me and we can find another time to go through it. Okay, so just give me a moment here to pull up. I had all the windows ready to go and now I have somehow lost them all. There we go. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that. This is actually not, this is the mind map here. So just an example, a quick example of mind map. So this is where I'm starting from, although ideally this would be my goal. This is something that's new, I'm just working on it. So this is not a polished, this is a raw mind map. So it might be overwhelming to look at like this, but essentially start with one step. This is the next round of steps, which are kind of top level steps for me. This is how I do my LinkedIn searches. Drill down. And then the awesome thing is that you can color code. So if I'm looking at this, again, without getting into too much detail, I can just put things in red, things that are ideas, but I haven't actually done yet. Put things in gray, things that I'm going to delegate for someone else to do, and put things in green that are ready to go, which as you can see, none of this is ready to go because it is just a draft. But that's kind of what a mind map looks like. And usually you can press tab to do a new thing, or you can press enter to do a thing that's underneath, which also is really easy when you're kind of mapping out your ideas to flow into. Okay, and I will just leave it at that for now. The next thing that I am going to show you guys though is my teamwork process. So organizing things in teamwork, this actually expands a little bit beyond the process and into organizing tasks and things that need to be done. For a really concrete, beautiful, polished teamwork process, I highly suggest Gretchen and Trina's Google Docs and teamwork integration video that they posted on the mastermind group a few months ago. It's about 20 minutes long and it is way nicer and more polished in terms of handling processes. In terms of how I use teamwork, I do use it to put in processes, but I mostly use it to implement the getting things done methodology, which is a way of getting control of the million tasks that you have to do at any given time, so that your head can be free and clear to make sure that you're prioritizing things as they come up, or rather not quite as they come up, but prioritizing things as they need to be done instead of as they come up. Does that make sense? Mark, just to ask you, were you looking specifically for processes on teamwork, or was it the getting things done on teamwork?
Mainly, I want to see how you're doing things. I am going through Gretchen's stuff. I'm going to grab the links for people since I have it bookmarked right here. Getting things done, I have looked at specifically because I know that's going to help some 10Kers who are transitioning to the management side. But I don't think that way personally, but I see the helpful side when you're the manager talking to a project manager, because then you can inbox everything, work with them to schedule everything, and then the PM can bring it to the team.
Okay. Yeah, I personally, I am my own project manager. So this I use to delegate tasks and use tasks for myself. But I'm going to introduce you guys to it anyway. There's kind of a few nuggets in the system that are really effective. I don't use every single little thing. And then we'll just open it up to talks. You can ask questions. We can dig deeper into it. So the basic concept that is behind everything that I'm doing here is kind of what Mark referenced, which is using an inbox system for new ideas. And what that means is essentially having a catch-all where you can store the stuff that's floating around your brain so that you can organize it later and create actionable steps later. That's kind of like one of the basic principles of the Getting Things Done methodology. The second basic principle is that, and I should say something that's tied into that first principle is that if stuff isn't being stored in your head, then you have less stress, more room to focus on the things that matter, and more energy to focus on the things that come up at a time. The second thing that's really important is organizing things by context. And that's what I want to focus on today, because I think it really helps for processes. And that's been the key thing that has helped me get way more stuff done. And that's what I'm going to be kind of digging deeper into. And then the third thing is having master lists so that you can check against those lists and make sure that there's a next step that has to happen. And that idea of the next step, which is if you define a goal and you define a clear next actionable step to get there, then you're going to be way more effective, because one of the things that keeps us from doing stuff is not having it be clearly defined. So for instance, you might put something on a list like book meeting about upcoming project, or meet with prospective client. But actually the first step to do that might not be, that's actually even more specific than things on a list. Thing on a list might be MHA project, right? What is the actual next step to get that done? Hard to say from looking at it. So you have to do an extra level of thinking to figure out, okay, what is that next step I have to do? And then you have to do it. And sometimes in terms of your motivation, when you've done that next step, you kind of lose that motivation on the way, so to speak. So what I do is, without getting too deep into the inbox system, when I have an errant idea that is distracting me from what I'm doing and is going to send me off on a rabbit hole, I just jot it down and I put it in a literal box. And I like to use a physical box just because it's a list of physical things that I go through, which gives it more weight to me. Then when I reconsider those tasks, so even if you're not using an inbox system, you can reconsider whenever you're considering a task that needs to be done. I look at it in terms of what is the goal, what is the next actionable step to get to that goal, and then the third thing I look at is what kind of context does that goal require, and that's kind of the magic that I want to share and want to show in teamwork. So I'm going to share my screen here and just show a little bit more what I mean by context. So this is my teamwork site. There's a few different ways to look at it if you guys haven't used teamwork before. There's a list of projects, all active, ongoing projects. And when I'm trying to kind of use a process or figure out a next actionable step, then I will go into the individual I will go into the individual project and create a list and transfer my process over to that, basically. And the key thing that I want to look at here is my internal one. So when we go over into the tasks, yes, it's organized into lists. And a lot of the time, this is that exact processing that I went through in terms of what do I need to go through, right? Organized list, that's all it is. But the thing that really makes it special is these colored tags here. And that's the thing that I want to kind of just introduce to you guys, and then we'll open it up. So organizing things by context, the power that that has is that when you're doing things that are different contexts, it's really difficult to go from one to the other. You have to totally recenter yourself into this new thing. What I mean by that is if you're doing internet research and you have a whole bunch of different internet research to do, it's really easy to either you research something, you make a few notes on it, and then you research another thing and make a few notes on it, and research another thing and make a few notes on it, or you assign the list of stuff to be researched to a VA. Versus if I'm prepping a document, this is prepping a document template. If I'm doing internet research and then I'm prepping a document template and then I'm thinking and planning about a more complex project, and then I'm making a phone call, each time I reorient myself in a different direction, it gets difficult to keep up. So one of the best examples of this is calls. It works really well for internet research too. So when I'm putting things in, I'm organizing them as usual. And when you are creating a process, you can tag the things in the process that you know are these different aspects. And what really makes the difference is this other view here, which was useless to me before I started doing that, which is if you go up here to the Everything tab, now all of a sudden you can see everything you have to do, and you can slice and dice it according to that context. So for example, if I look at things that are due anytime, and I look and I do a tag like calls, and I think there's not very many of them because I've actually completed all my calls. Calls are something that I found to be a nightmare to get done. And when I was working my way one by one through a list of things I needed to do to get something accomplished, then I was finding that it was taking me forever to do it. Now, if I have to do a call, when I'm organizing things, I put the number I have to call in there. It takes an extra minute to look up the number and drop it in there. And when I'm doing a call, now I just go through and do all these calls. And you can see I actually have all my home projects in here too. And there's not very many because this is one that I've been kind of avoiding. And these other things are home stuff I haven't done yet. Same thing, if you're doing internet research, or delegate is a really good one. These are things that I'm going to delegate to a VA. When I'm looking at tasks, I realize that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't want to do. And if I'm just tagging it as I go, that lets me do it fast and move on instead of worrying about, okay, how am I going to get this done? Who am I going to delegate it to? And then when I'm looking for instance, I'm hiring a VA and I need a sample task for them to do, it's easy for me to scroll down this list and go, okay, this is something, here's something that someone could complete in an hour that doesn't require a lot of education that will give me a good assessment of their skills, and boom. So this is what I mean in terms of slicing and dicing the information according to tags. And that was kind of the core thing that I wanted to communicate. I'm happy to also kind of go through anything else related to kind of processes and teamwork that has to do with that. That was just something I thought was so valuable I wanted to share, but I'm going to open it up now. One
thing I would like you to go over, since I know just a little bit about getting things done, I do know one of their core concepts is you have to prioritize tasks and you have to prioritize home with work. Otherwise, you just mess things up. And that's why you have the home projects.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Now, what I got out of getting things done was that you don't have to organize business and home together, but it helps, because if you're overwhelmed with home tasks, this system works really, really well to organize those as well. It also makes sure that all that stuff that's floating around in your head, I actually use this a lot for home tasks, because while I'm working, home tasks will, they'll kind of come to me. And I'll just jot a note, throw it in my inbox, and not think about it anymore. And that's really easy for me to do. So that lets me later think about and prioritize my home tasks. But in terms of priority, that's a really important thing. Every week, what I do is I just review, I just do kind of this really quick weekly process. It's not from getting things done. And I just look at, okay, what do I need to do this week? What are all of my active projects that I have going on? I list them out and I go, okay, what's the next step for each one? And that's what I was talking about, which is having a master list and checking things against it. And then I'll go through and I'll add the high priority to those things, and I'll add a due date. So I do use the prioritizing system, and I left my own notes behind because that was something that I wanted to mention. I mostly just use high priority. Sometimes I'll use medium priority. And what I'll do is, once I do have a deadline for it, I will just drop a deadline into here. And then the other way that I slice my data that is super important is that when I'm not trying to do things of a specific context, I'll do this week and include overdue tasks. And I will just look at, and it'll show me the most important things first, and then I can look at it by project. So these are all my internal projects. This is a client project, and I know, okay, these are things that need to be done this week or that are overdue. And the highest priority things will go first. So I will look through and go, okay, high priority stuff. And then once that's all checked off, you can see this week I didn't get a lot of my stuff checked off. I'll scroll down closer to the bottom. And these are things that it should be things, if I sliced and diced it correctly, it should be things that are due this week or overdue that don't have a particular priority attached to them. The other key thing that I wanted to mention that is really, really, really critical, that has nothing to do with processes, but everything to do with being on top of your projects, is I record everything that I'm waiting for under a waiting for tag. So if somebody says, yeah, I'm going to get that to you, or even if I'm waiting for a package to get in, I just throw it in right away in the moment. I just put it right in there, tag it with waiting for, and then every Friday I go and I check all my waiting fors, and I just check in. I'll drop a due date in there, which is when they're supposed to get it to me, and everything that's at their due date or past their due date that I haven't gotten yet, I'll just send them a little follow-up, and it is magical. It's amazing. So I really can't recommend that enough. Even if you just have a waiting for list that you have somewhere, but I'm a fan of keeping it simple. So even though this may look complicated to you, it's all in one system. I know what I'm doing every week. I have a process that kind of outlines how I organize things that has just evolved from me doing it every week and finding out, okay, this is too complicated. This is taking me too long every week, so I'm not doing it because it's too complicated. Time to drop a few steps. Time to see, okay, where else can I put this in the week, or is this really necessary to keep things flowing smoothly?
So you're primarily working for yourself in the project manager. Are you checking it on Monday and then making your physical list where the master list is the cloud account, and then you're just working off the physical list, or do you check the project manager every day?
I check the project manager every day. I manage clients and VAs through this as well. So I was just showing you because it's everything. I think that was all people, or unassigned stuff and me, but I usually have it set up for me, for my tasks. But if I want to see what my VA is going to do, then I'll go in and look at all the tasks for her. That's another thing that you can kind of select up there. And then I also use it to assign clients tasks. They don't pay any attention to the tags. All they do is receive it in their inbox so that I'm still managing it from that system instead of going kind of back and forth from email to Teamwork, because it can send stuff automatically to my clients. I'll just do that. The other question you had, which is, do I check this every day? Do I work from a list? I will create a physical list on Monday. So I will just list out. I have a template that I use. I'm trying out Sarah Olivieri's productivity planner as well as soon as I get it in the mail. But I pretty much just look at, okay, I do kind of a 4-point process. One is, what did I get accomplished next week? Or what did I get accomplished last week? And are there any follow-up things I need to do? So that'll just list 10 things. It also gets me stoked because it's easy to forget what you did last week. Then I'll look at all my active projects and just say, okay, what is my next step for each active project? Then I'll look at kind of my internal projects and be like, okay, these are my rocks for the quarter. Do I have a next step for each of those? And then I'll kind of distill that all down to 3 things and go, okay, there are 3 essential things I need to get done this week that I'm totally screwed if I don't do. And I'll write those down. And then I'll just go into Teamwork, make sure that all of those tasks are actually in Teamwork. Prioritize them if they're like those top 3 things or if they're super important. And then I will not look at that list again. I just use it as a tool to put stuff into Teamwork. And then I just use Teamwork throughout the week. And I mostly use that everything view I was just showing you guys. And I'll use it either to see what's due this week, or I'll use it to see, okay, if I'm doing something of a certain task, then I'll just do everything, do any time for that task and do everything on that. Like I'll go as far down the list as I can within the time frame that I have.
And how long do you feel that takes on Monday? Half hour, hour?
I also do some, I would say that whole thing takes me about an hour and a half. Sometimes it's less, but I also do a few other things in terms of my finances. Like I use that time to like check up on finances and stuff like that as well. So I'd say it fills the hour and a half.
Yeah, your weekly check-in. Because I was wondering how long, because generally whenever I do it, it is around 90 minutes as well.
Yeah,
so
90 minutes. That's how long it takes me. I also spend about an hour on Fridays going through my inbox and just doing all my check-ins, checking the waiting fors, that kind of stuff. Importing, in that case, I import my expenses on Fridays and I kind of, I reconcile it on Mondays kind of a thing. So I can look at I do a scorecard on Mondays too, like all of that kind of fleshes out the hour and a half. But those 4 steps, which actually I do have listed in a process, which is just under my admin and finance. I have a processes tab in my OneNote, and actually I will quickly share screen because it is process related, and I was intending on doing this earlier. So this is my OneNote. So this is just where I keep all my notes. I'm very written driven. Like I said, I write things down. So OneNote is really valuable for me because it's quicker than Google Docs with its formatting. And beginning of the week, this is what I do. I look at my VTO. I fill out that sheet I just said, which is those 4 things in order. And I don't have that listed because the sheet guides me through it. Add all action items to Teamwork, fill out my scorecard, which is bolded because I was forgetting it sometimes. And then these 3 are just kind of all lumped into one. So any check-ins I need to do, any scheduling or reaching out, any things that I'm going to delegate to other people that I need to start delegating before the week kind of starts fully. And then I have a link to my PDF sheet. And then same thing, end of the week. This is newer, which is why I have all these kind of other interlinked stuff, is because I needed it written down for me to do it consistently. But these days I can just look at this and be like, okay, those are the 7 steps I'm going to go through. And I don't necessarily need to click through to find out, okay, my detailed inbox process, it's like way more detailed, but I almost never look at it because I've got it under control. Sometimes just to make sure I've done all 5, I'll uncheck and recheck these to make sure I'm getting them all down. But that is I would say that's more complex than you need to be at the beginning. Sense? Any other kind of questions or things?
Say I have a question.
Yeah?
So you talked about using Evernote, OneNote, Word, but you have it there, but you also put a lot of stuff in Teamwork. Are you basically using Teamwork for to set up your processes?
What I do is I use OneNote, in my case OneNote, but Google Docs or whatever would work just as well. I use that to document my processes. And I use Teamwork to execute processes.
Oh, okay. That's what I was trying to understand. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So when you're documenting your processes, it's really important to just get it out there and organize it and play with it and revise it without needing to kind of work through the technology and all those different steps. So that's why I recommend just word processing or mind maps, because it's just really easy to play around with. Once you get into Teamwork, then you're adding things like due dates and priority levels and tags and saving these processes as templates. That's kind of the missing link because I haven't fully done that, so I couldn't show you that. But document them in one system and then turn them into templates on Teamwork if you have to, or follow them and list the kind of next actions that you have to on Teamwork.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I took and went through Gretchen's video in Teamwork on how to build, a whole web project from front to back and put it all in Teamwork is fuzzy as the video was, I think I figured it out from discovery all the way down to post-launch. But I didn't do any processes, so I'm wondering if the next step for me is to go back and look at each one of those and look at what I need to do processes for and document those.
Exactly. So what you're describing is what I call the kind of top down. So you already have kind of what each of those things is. And now you need to actually kind of flush them out. So I wouldn't necessarily flush them out on Teamwork. I would just either take a mind map or take a word pad of something.
Yeah, when I said document, that's what I meant, because you know, I'm already I built the template, now I'm using it on some projects for customers, and it's working out okay, but I think I got to document those processes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Teamwork is a project management system, right? Or more specifically, a task management system that also includes things like files and time tracking and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, it's task management. But you need to know what tasks you're going to put in there before you can really use it for its full kind of breadth of what it offers.
Now, those little things you had, those were tags, right? Because I haven't used tags in Teamwork. So you just build a list of tags and then apply them to each task.
Yes,
right?
and I would even potentially go, you can, again, it's kind of the top-down, bottom route. You can look at all the different tags that you potentially need, make a list of them, and then assign them as necessary. Or how I started is I just started to think about the common context as I'm putting something in. Because the cool thing about tags is that you can just put them in as you go, and you can make up new ones whenever you want and just choose a color. So for instance, I put in something that was a call. I was like, oh, that's a call. I'm going to create a call tag and put the phone number in there. And now every time I have a call, I'm just going to reuse that same tag. So I ended up having some tags that I don't use that I eventually deleted. But that kind of helped me figure out, okay, these are the contexts that I'm already working in. And then, so for instance, my bookkeeping system is Zoho Books. So I have a tag that's Zoho, because once I'm in Zoho, it's great to just do everything that's Zoho related, because every time I go in, there's almost a little tiny mini learning curve in terms of reorienting myself to the software and what I have to do. But I love tags because you can have more than one. So I also have like a think and plan tag, which is when I have a long stretch of time in the morning and there's a project or something that I really need to be at my best because it's going to require some like organizing and deep thinking. And I do that so that first thing in the morning, which for me is my most brain active time, I can look at all the think and plan tags and decide, okay, this is the most important. I have the most brain power now. But something that's think and plan might also be like a document template I have to prep or a Zoho thing that I have to do, you know? So the benefit is that you can use more than one. Does that make sense?
A big thing with tags too is I believe you can merge them. So you can literally just go crazy with them and then review them every month and see what needs to be kept, killed, and combined.
Yes, exactly.
You pretty much use the tags for anything you want to be able to search for.
Yes. Anything you want to group together, anything you want to be able to kind of filter by, that's what a tag is really good for. Because you don't want to have to search an individual word to find everything that relates to that word. You know what I mean? Like that's just complicated. You're not finding everything you need. It's a really simple habit to just get into the habit of tagging things. If it's a habit you have a hard time getting into, you could even do that list of tags, explain the context, document that, and have a VA go in and tag everything, for example. You know what I mean? Like there's different ways to approach it based on what works best for your unique needs and your unique brain.
Yeah, and I have an assistant, and where I'm struggling at is what to give them to do. That's my biggest problem right now.
Well, I find that the documenting your processes helps with that in that, like I know when I have trouble delegating, it's because I think, okay, I have to think of all these things and figure out all these things and give them all this information before they can go do it. And if I just write it down once, then I still might do it a few more times. But each time, like for instance, I use subcontractors. But so I do all the for those of you who don't know, I'm a content strategist and run kind of a content agency rather than doing web design. So I do all of the strategy and all the client meetings and all the outlining and stuff myself. And then there comes a point where I have to give it off to a sub. So I have to have that all prepared and organized. Now, at first, it felt like, well, gosh, for the time it took to prepare and organize, I could be doing a lot of that writing myself. And then once I kind of got over that hump and got it, so I was just like, okay, now I have a list of stuff that I need to put together to give to someone for them to use. And I adjust it now and then. Now I realize that, oh, wow, actually just the act of organizing the information, finding a writer that's the right one for this project and putting it out there is still taking me a lot of time. So, but now even to hand off that process to someone else, I'm realizing, oh, okay, I need to put in where these things are located now instead of just what needs to be found. Now I'm like, okay, here's where you find it in say the project folder / this, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that processes evolve and that's okay. And if you just start somewhere and make a simple list and organize it, then you can grow with it as your needs grow. And I see, Mark, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, to go off of that, you have to do a process in a marathon, but once the processes are down, when you're running through it, you'll find where you skip parts and where parts you had never ran into issues, but you suddenly ran into an issue. And instead of having to put it to the side and eventually tackle that issue, you can just chuck the issue into a process list and you don't have to worry about that ever happening again.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. It's like working smarter in that you're doing more work up front, but you're saving yourself that work later. So now I'm finding that another thing which is good for helping delegation is that when I'm using that tagging system, every time, now I do it every single time I put a task in, I'm like, is this something I could delegate? And if it is, then I just throw that delegate tag on there. And every once in a while, I go back and look at all the things that I said delegate on. And some of them, it turns out, actually require way more work in order for me to delegate because the process isn't kind of flushed out. But I'm starting to find that as I have more processes also, like, they copy well. So a process for one thing might be similar to a process for another thing. And the fact that you already documented that first process just makes it easier to write down the second process. And so I'll find that with delegating things, I'm like, okay, I want to delegate this thing, but actually the process for that is pretty similar to the process for this. So I'm just going to adapt it a little bit, send it off, and refine it later.
Another big thing to go with the marathoning, don't try and marathon out every single task for a website. By marathon, I mean focus on a bucket. Focus on content strategy or onboarding, whatever is the most important. So if you have a project going right now and you're in development stage, don't process out the copywriting design because that's not going to help you. Process out the development phase and the QA phase and then the launch phase. Get them all down to 20%. And then 100% out the ones that you're immediately doing, because that's going to help catch any potholes. Yeah. And it will get the most accurate results.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would also say that a really great one to start with is your project process. That's the one that I started with. And some of you that I've spoken to and shared my project process with, you'll see it's 4 steps long. It's not crazy. And if you are using a 10K model of some kind, then you have the 10K model's top level process to go off of, which is qualification, just off the top of my head here, but it's like qualification, discovery, solution presentation, proposal, project launch. Like that's a process. You know what I mean? Like that is a top level process. Then you can do what Mark's suggesting and bucket each of those things. So for instance, my process is discovery, proposal, which I'm changing to needs assessment, strategic planning, and delivery. And each of those, like that's what I started with. That's what I started with. When I shifted from doing totally web design and content to doing just content, I did a project or two and I was like, okay, what are the things that every single project shares? And not every project has those 4, but every project has some combination of those 4. Then it's easy for me to go, okay, the smallest part of that is discovery. So because I just come in on one discovery meeting and do one kind of chunk of prep for that. So I'll do discovery. Okay, what do I need to complete discovery? And I'll break that down. So in the case of a normal 10K discovery, that might be discovery 1, 2, 3. Okay, now you want to get discovery, that kind of bucket of processes handled. So you're like, okay, what do we do to go through discovery 1, 2, 3? What's the research that we do? Do we have an agenda for the meeting? At the end of discovery, are we making a decision? Which we all know, yes or no, go on or hit eject. So that kind of bucket model, that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say top down. And I totally 150% agree with Mark. Don't try to do everything at once. That's where it gets overwhelming. Pick a corner. If you're not sure where to start with those 3 basic categories, which are sales and marketing, projects and operations, and finance and admin. Yeah.
Don't do every bucket, but do 100% on one bucket. Nothing sucks more than half-assing a process and then running into it and then being completely lost. Because if a process is only half set up for you, you don't even want to use it because you start thinking about everything that's missing in it.
Yeah, and that's why I would say start with the processes that you do the most often. That's another reason I say start with projects, because we all have admin and sales and marketing and finance to do, but unless you've reached a size where your role is primarily sales, in which case focus on sales, right? But if you're still spending a lot of time in your projects, delivering your projects, start with projects, because you'll be able to flesh out those processes much faster because you're doing them over and over again. And then you'll get better at fleshing out and defining processes so that by the time you start looking at, say, the admin and finance, if that's kind of been what you spend less time on, then, or if you have someone else handling that, right, then you can teach them better, or you can have your own kind of methodology more concrete before you do it. And I can see that Pam just threw something into the chat in terms of a place to start with basic lists as well. So you guys might want to check that out. And actually, I'll read it out loud for people who are doing the recording. She said, you can also start with basic lists here and modify for your own business. And the URL is www.process.st. So I haven't checked that out, but hopefully that can be helpful to you guys as well.
I was going to ask about that because that's a tool you can use instead of Word or Evernote or anything. It's obviously paid. I've actually been reading some of their, they put a number of different PDF documents together that talk about processes. It's quite interesting, actually. Okay,
that's great. Like if it works, and maybe even I'm going to check it out because I love tools and stuff. That being said, what I kind of started off with is the reason I say start with OneNote or Google Docs is so that you don't get bogged down picking a tool.
Yeah, I had a rant about tools on Facebook as well. It's like half of the processes I've documented out has been on cocktail napkins at restaurants. Yeah. Because that's just when my brain's free to think about them. And then I just bring that into Trello, move them around, and then I move into Teamwork as a full template with due dates, priorities, tags, and roles.
Yeah, I think that's super valuable, and kind of part of the gold in there is kind of once again that concept of documenting your processes and executing your processes as being 2 different kind of buckets. Documenting your process, it's the important thing is to just do it, to just get it out there, whether it's jotting it down on paper, using a mind map, using a Trello board. Even Teamwork I think has boards now, although I haven't looked at them at all. And just get it down and start with multiple iterations. You know what I mean? Like kind of like with Lean Canvas, it's more important to get something down, don't spend a ton of time on it, and do it over and over again rather than just kind of trying to make it perfect and then leaving it in a drawer to be forgotten about. And then worry about executing the processes separately, right? Like that's where you can use all of that functionality in Teamwork or whatever to set due dates and priorities and tags and etc. But those are 2 separate categories. And they are the 2 basic pieces. Like I said, those are those 2 habits. I started off, some of you guys weren't here when I started off by saying that a process is essentially a habit. And if you can master just 2 habits which are documenting your processes and executing your processes, then that saves you from having to remember and learn and get used to up to hundreds of different habits, because you're just in the habit of documenting it down and executing and rinse and repeat, right? So it may seem like it's a lot of work, and it may seem like it's a lot of work up front, and it may seem frustrating and take you some time to get into, but it's worth it because it's going to save you so much more time in the long term, especially when you're bringing people on. Like, I'm bringing someone on right now. I'm in the process of hiring 2 VAs, and having this stuff documented is gold. Even though now that I'm doing some stuff that was processes for myself are now becoming processes for other people, so I'm needing to change them a little bit. But having that thing to jump off of is just saving so much time. Because the reason I'm bringing someone on is because I don't have a ton of time. If it's taking me 10 times more time to train them on each and everything, that eats into a lot of the benefits of having someone. So we're kind of reaching the end. I do have to go. I can stick around a few extra minutes, but I will have to go kind of in the next 10 minutes or so. Were there any other kind of questions or comments or perspectives that you'd like to share?
I mean, this goes with automations too. I mean, if you're setting up a automation to follow up with a client about discovery, but you're not actually selling, then you're wasting time. What you should actually be doing with automations is the same type of thing. Document out the process when they occur, and then go execute that automation instead of just sending an email.
Yes.
And it takes time to build that habit as well, just like building the habit to delegate instead of just thinking, oh, now I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And those, I feel, really are the core 4 that everyone kind of has trouble shifting from maker mode to manager mode, where they need to be able to do all 4 of those to properly manage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And something popped into my head there, but I just lost my train of thought in the same moment. So sorry, maybe it'll come back to me probably after we like sign off. I'll be like, oh yeah, that super valuable thing.
That's what comment threads are for.
No, totally. And that actually reminds me that I'll have to post the recording at some point. Once it's ready. That would be something I would have forgotten. Something I can delegate.
I do have a question for you. So, are you using project templates or are you using task list templates in Teamwork? Because what I'm finding is if I do a web project template,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to be assaulted with like 300 tasks day 1. And that is a nightmare to deal with, especially if you have to move things forward. But then there's some disadvantages with the tasks list as well. So I'm wondering what you're doing for your content.
I definitely use task lists. I find that I started trying a whole project list and found it too overwhelming. I also don't use milestones. I find that milestones lock things in too hard. I know some people do, that's great. So I have, for instance, some task lists go onto every single project. So for instance, first my like onboarding task list, right? So I need an agreement, an invoice paid, a weekly meeting assigned. For myself, like as in Anansi personally, like we have to set up the next invoices and schedule them and stuff like that. We need to request discovery documents or other supporting documents if we don't have them already, stuff like that. So that will go on to every single project. But beyond that, like I said, I know that every project has one of those 4 steps, which are discovery, needs assessment, strategic planning, and content delivery. But not every project has all 4 of those. And what that looks like often my strategic planning section will be widely varied based on the budget and the project. So for instance, delivery almost always looks the same, which is compile information to be assigned to a writer, assign first drafts, revise first drafts, send out to client, like, you know, just the kind of basic steps. But strategic planning, you know, like we're always going to be pretty much doing an avatar build out. So I have a task list there that goes on to almost every project. But other things like different types of interviews or calls and stuff we might have to do, that stuff sometimes we'll put in manually and sometimes we'll just pick and choose the templates, the task templates we need. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, like that's what I started doing as well. I was just wondering if I was missing something with the project templates because it just seems too much like a hammer when you want a saw.
Yeah, I find especially doing projects at the kind of 10K level. Now, obviously selling content, I'm not often selling 10K content projects, but doing things kind of at that higher level, I find that it ends up being more custom, right? Like that's what we do. We find out what a business's specific needs are, and we deliver according to those needs. So if you're just kind of plopping in a whole project just like that, like that doesn't work for me. And it didn't work for me when I was doing web projects either, because I need it to be flexible enough that I'm taking care of the individual project's needs. In fact, I would say I start out by kind of doing it all more off the cuff. And then after I've seen 2 or 3 projects, I'm like, okay, this task list I can refine and save, because this is the way we've done it for 2 or 3 different projects. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? I see you, Patty, Julie.
I do about what Mark said, but I don't want to keep you longer because real quick, in Teamwork, based on what Gretchen did, I built a web project template, and it was a project with all the tasks in it. What you're saying is you don't do that. You create task lists and then bring them into a project.
Yeah, I use like what Gretchen and Trina talk about in terms of like organizing files and organizing processes and all that. I find really great. But for me, like I said, for me, the task lists, like I start out with my kind of those main 4 steps. Right. And then I know that, for instance, within the strategic planning phase, there's 2 or 3 different things that we do, more than that, probably like 5 or 6 different kind of like flows it could take. And I'll create a task list for each of those flows. And then, a smaller project, we might just be building out an avatar and deep dive, which is engagement mapping and all of that. Versus another one, we might be doing 3 strategic planning interviews and calling the end user and all this different type of stuff. And so I'll have a different flow for that more complex stuff that I'll bring in for those projects.
Another thing is, if you're using the due date system at all, using the task list, you can say start on this day. Mm-hmm. So if you have content strategy and your meeting with the client gets pushed back by a week or 2 just because of holidays or sickness, then every single task below content strategy, you actually have to move forward 2 weeks.
I took in the one project I'm working, built that template, and I copied it for a project, and I do have task lists, discovery, client task, design, development, whatever. And I did have to, and I had milestones set up, and I got to push one project 2 weeks because my client missed their weekly meeting. It actually allowed me, it did pop up and say, do you want to push these ones forward?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
It has to be set up with the correct dependencies. Otherwise, sometimes it'll miss a couple. Right. And then it's a mess when you're looking at it like, why is this set to this? While if you have the task list, what you can say is start on the day that we pull it in and have it due within, say, 5 or 10 days for 1 week or 2 weeks, because you can also skip weekends. Mm-hmm. And what's nice about that is if a project gets delayed and you're doing something like a website where you have strategy, you have content, you have design, you have development, and maybe design is almost parallel with content, like halfway through, you can just pull it in on that day and it will set all the due dates correctly.
Mm-hmm. Like 5 days out, 7 days out. Teamwork has also been improving itself quite a bit in the past few months. Like I've found it to have gotten a lot stronger in terms of how it lets you manage kind of priorities and due dates. The reason I personally don't use milestones is because I found that they messed up my due dates. It would be an extra thing that I have to go in and push back, especially if things are overlapping. Because often different aspects of the project will be overlapping as I'm waiting to get stuff back. So if you're having trouble, and now it's been almost a year since I have used Milestone, so I can't speak more specifically to it because I've mostly
I can speak a little bit about that. I'm using task milestones because milestones, unlike almost every other project manager I've used, you cannot set dependencies. So for example, normally you wouldn't start a homepage layout building until the homepage design is finished. So if you have that milestone set up, you actually can't set that dependency. You have to assume someone will actually go check it or the PM won't load it in. So you have to create a task milestone. What I'm finding the milestone helpful for, though, is you can set, if you're doing multiple projects with the client at once, so a spring ad campaign, that can be a milestone alongside a web page redesign milestone. And then you're able to see the whole % completed.
Okay.
And you can also do that in projects, but it also depends on it. It's helpful to see the progress across multiple lists because you can put multiple lists under a milestone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting way. I've never considered using milestones in that way. I usually just do independent projects for independent, like, you know, I might have 2 or 3 projects for a client and I'll just do them separately. But that's, of course, like any system, right? That's why we start with you or the people who are going to be using it, then the process, and then the tool, right?
Yeah, I think the main advantage behind milestones for many is you can export them into an iCalendar, which then loads into Google Calendar, Outlook, or whatever you're using. And that can be helpful for management, I'm sure, when you're working like 5-man agency and you're not part of the day-to-day project management and you just need that overview of, okay, this is those milestones we're hitting.
Right, without having to check into Teamwork's unique calendar system on its own. Just one more thing to check. Yeah, did anyone else, was there kind of any last questions anyone wanted to ask me specifically before I go? I mean, you guys are welcome to hang around and chat, of course, afterwards. No, not seeing anything. Okay, awesome. I love talking about processes and I love talking to people. So if any of you guys want to talk about this more in detail, or you start kind of implementing some of this stuff and find, hey, this doesn't work or this doesn't make sense, by all means, email me. My email address, I'll drop it in the chat. It's changed for some of you who have emailed me in the past. It's just say, S-A-Y, at anansicontent.com. That's A-N-A-N-S-I content.com. And yeah, I'm happy to hop on a call and chat. So thanks for joining us, because I actually learned quite a bit as well. And I hope you guys have an awesome day and an awesome weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.